I also have a lume cube too, if you want.
Those are dope, but not for what I'm trying to do.
Whatever, Pete, fine. I mean, just all over my lume. Hey guys, it's Cam with Craft + Tailored, and in this episode of What Is on My Wrist, we're talking about a Seiko Professional Series diver from 1969. The reference is 6159-7001. I'm really excited about this watch. They are pretty rare and kind of seldomly seen, so I'm really excited to have this one in the shop. But also, it's a diver, it's no secret, we are total fans of Seiko watches, and this one definitely packs a punch, so let's get into the details. To kind of explain the 6159-7001, I want to take you back through the history of the Seiko Professional Series diver. And what's really cool is that Seiko has, out of all the brands out there, really done a good job of like paying homage to their history, and they do a lot of kind of like modern reissues. We've seen like the modern reissued Willard, and this has been reissued, and there's a lot of cool watches that are in current production, but also are kind of taking design cues from a fit form, feature finish perspective from the past, which is really cool as a brand that's producing watches in the modern era. So really cool, big fan of Seiko. And I think that this is kind of a good entry point into talking about watches that are being reissued, but obviously kind of being designed off of the originals. So our friends over at Fratello watches, they did a really good job of putting together a really cool video, which I'll link to below, and writing a couple articles about the Professional Series divers. They did a really good job of covering it, so I'm just gonna kind of brush over that, but if you want more information, you wanna dive deep into the details, these are the articles and the videos that I referenced when I was learning about the reference in the series of Professional Series divers, and they did a great job of outlining it. So the first Professional Series diver actually came out in 1967, and it was the 6215-7000, and it looks very similar to this example, but there are a few things that were, different about it. The 6215 was produced in 1967, and it shares a lot of the same kind of basic design cues to the 6159, 7000, and 7001. There's actually 3 watches that fall into this category, and what's really cool about this reference range in the Professional Series divers, starting in 1967 and ultimately ending in 1969, is there's a very short production period. The watches were only produced for 3 years, but what's also very interesting about this kind of series of watches is that there's these kind of small modifications and tweaks, which I think really identifies how Seiko is an innovator and is pushing the design from both a technical and from an ergonomic perspective. And we still see that in Seiko watches today. But in 67, the 6215-7000 was produced, and basically the design characteristics between the 6215, the 6159-7000, and the 6159-7001 or 7001 are all kind of the same in the sense that they're a monoclock design, meaning that the movement and everything loads through the top side of the case. But there are some differences in terms of kind of like the crown and the bezels and also the dial layout and formats. I actually personally like the 6159-7001 out of all 3 of the references. I think it's the most refined out of the 3. The 6215-7000 has a little bit of a different dial, whereas the 6159-7000 and the 61-7001 are a little bit more similar in their design with just a couple of minor design cues. The thing that's really cool about the 6159 as well as the 6215 is that they use a Seiko high beat movement, and this is kind of a movement that we would see in watches in this era, like in the Grand Seiko type of watches. High beat movement is really awesome, and it's a much more Professional Series movement. It's much more accurate. The thing that I really love about it is if you look at the sweep seconds hand, it literally seems to like kind of glide across the dial. If you look closely, you'll kind of see the ticking, but even on like a time grapher, it's like tick, tick, tick. It's like really a beautiful thing to look at. Being that it's a Professional Series diver, I think that in this era, in 1967, 1968, Rolex was coming out with watches that were more of a Professional Series diver with the Sea Dweller. Saturation diving was kind of moving into more commonplace, and these watches were produced specifically Was that like a bump, 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 bump,
Yeah.
bump, bump? So in that era in time, saturation diving and commercial diving at the professional level was definitely becoming something that had a technical requirement, and watch manufacturers were building watches to meet those technical needs. And I think that this watch was kind of, I guess, a competitor in a way to that. I don't know if it was a direct competitor, but I would say that watches being overbuilt or more of a professional capacity were definitely moving into more of the forefront of what a lot of watch manufacturers, including Rolex, including Seiko, that was kind of a main focus point for them. To talk a little bit about kind of the technical features, the movement actually is running at 36,000 vibrations per hour, so very accurate movement. And I think what was unique about this time for Seiko is we have kind of an overbuilt chunky case, we have 300 meters of water resistance, we have this big chunky oversized bezel, we have the crown at the 4 o'clock position. The other thing that's really unique too is with most Seikos and Seiko divers, you can't really wind them, right? The movement is an automatic movement, but you actually have to shake the watch to put power into the watch, whereas like this crown, instead of just being kind of a lock-on case crown, is actually a screw-down crown. You can wind the watch, has a quick set date function, hacking date, and then also sweep seconds hand is also hacking as well. So Seiko was really kind of pushing not just the design elements of these watches and making them overbuilt, but also they were putting high-end movement in these watches to yield a much more professional type of application where exact timing was definitely important. The 6159, I guess, is the precursor to like the Marine Masters and like the Seiko SKX series, which are really popular watches. I mean, those watches kind of dominated the wrists of a lot of guys in the mid 2000s. And I think we see that design history and heritage in what Seiko is producing from a modern perspective, but we also see it in kind of these, early examples. Again, these watches were produced for a very limited amount of time. The whole entire Seiko Professional series of divers was produced from 1967 to 1969. To my knowledge, most of these watches were sold in Japan. They were never sold in the United States. The ones that are available in the United States were either brought over, having been purchased at, say, like a military PX or by somebody that was in Japan. So it kind of makes having one of these watches in the United States at least kind of special. So the fact that we have one in the shop and that I'm able to experience this is pretty fun and cool. So from a fit, form, finish, technical features perspective, the thing that I love about the watch is that it's black and gold. It kind of gives me like this gilt kind of feel to the watch. The luminous filled markers are really cool. I love that it's got this little stoplight sweep seconds hand. That's a Seiko trait that I absolutely love and kind of lust over. The bezel's even gold in itself, and it's kind of an oversized watch, being at like 43 or 44 millimeters, depending on how you want to wear it. The watch is thick, and this monoclock case is also really interesting because there isn't any case back. The one thing that's really cool between the 6159 7000 and the 6159 7001 or 7001 is that the case back on the 7001 has kind of like this little like ring around the back, whereas the 7000 series is just plain. There's no like ring. I don't know why Seiko was doing that, maybe to grip like a wetsuit or something like that, but in any case, the case design itself is really, really comfortable. And it's a large watch, but it's very wearable. And I think that that's the thing that's really cool about Seiko watches is within the diver series is that they were producing watches that were ultimately kind of oversized. They're true tool watches, but also kind of ergonomically comfortable. The way that the case kind of like bevels up on the side softly kind of makes this thing really comfortable while on wrist. Again, I love the gilt finish. I love that these luminous markers, even though they were kind of big and oversized from like a technical perspective, are still kind of refined, right? We have like these gold luminous filled markers, which we didn't really see until like Rolex started doing that in the later part of the 1980s, and Seiko was doing that in the 60s. So I think that's kind of that interesting Japanese fit, form, finish design element that we really only see from brands like Seiko in this era, where you know, that attention to detail, that little extra step was even considered for a watch that was a professional series diver. The Hardlex Crystal is really cool as well because it kind of has a slight dome to the top side of the crystal, but there's kind of this super dome underneath the crystal as well. So if you look at it from an angle, there's like almost like bubble in a bubble. And the way that the bezel works is also really cool as well. So I'm really trying, again, not to fall in love with it. I say that about most of the watches that I review on the channel. A lot of care and time goes into what it is that we're ultimately reviewing, but this is a special one, and the condition of this specific example is really, really nice. I think that these watches for a long time really weren't sought after. They weren't as collectible. They were kind of just like, oh, that's that watch that Seiko produced for a limited period of time. You know, like most things vintage watch related, this one in specific is really, really awesome. So in any case, guys, I'll provide a link in the description below and above so that you can check this out. As always, guys, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That really helps out our channel. And if you've got watch questions, we're here and happy to help. Drop us a line at info@craftandtailored.com. If you're not doing so already, be sure to follow us on Instagram @craftandtailored, and I will see you guys in the next one. Honestly, I'm just gonna embrace the gray. I'm gonna let it go. You know,